Third time's the charm, right? What's up, Flick fans? Welcome back to the channel. I actually saw this movie a few days ago, but I've been really sick. It's a struggle. Doesn't matter. What matters is today we're talking about A Haunting in Venice, the third film in this trilogy. Did Kenneth Branagh nail it? And, do you like the new graphics? Let me know. In post-World War II Venice, Detective Poirot, now retired and living in his own exile, reluctantly attends a seance. Why would you do that? But when one of the guests is murdered, it's up to the former detective to once again uncover the killer. How often are you going to be in a place where someone gets killed, dude? Seriously? This film's rated PG-13 for strong violence, disturbing images, and thematic elements. And we are shifting genres here. The other two films in the trilogy have been firmly in the mystery category. This one's still a mystery, but it's taking on a horror vibe. It's taking on more of a thriller, but it's trying to be a scary-ish movie with the same mystery feel. And that's why when I first saw this trailer, I didn't really know what the movie was, and I said, wait, that's Kenneth Branagh. Is this the third movie in a trilogy?
Say what?
So let's look at the trilogy as a whole. Murder on the Orient Express, it was fine. I liked the cast, I liked the idea, but it's really Kenneth Branagh's performance in that first movie that is so entertaining, and the mystery itself for me was a bit too obvious. I think he created a good sense of atmosphere. The idea of doing it on a train was really interesting, but the story didn't really match up to everything surrounding that. But again, the cast worked. The second film, Death on the Nile, I feel like that story was a little less predictable. That story for me was a little more interesting, but there were some elements of the filmmaking that didn't really match up to whether it be the atmosphere of the first, the visual effects of the first. And honestly, I don't think the cast was as good. I like the cast, but for some reason they didn't work together as well as they did in the first movie. So I would consider the first two films fine. And then you look at A Haunting in Venice, and I'm like, okay, he's shifting directions. It's a bit more of something new, something fresh. But we know we're going to get a familiar mystery. How's he going to work around that? Well, let me tell you, he does. He works around it. The familiarity within the mystery itself is something that, you could look at in a movie like this and say, well, it takes it down a notch. And then you look at something like the pacing and say, well, it's not as fast-moving or as bright and entertaining and crowd-friendly as the first two films, because even the color grading on the first two movies, it feels more audience-friendly, audience-accessible, and of course, you do a horror movie, not everyone's going to respond in the same way. But I look at everything coming together, from the cast to the filmmaking to the way it all just works in harmony, and even with those slower moments, I was having a better time with A Haunting in Venice than I ever remember having with the first two films. And I look at this movie as maybe Branagh's best, other than Belfast, because Belfast, that was an Oscar contender, an Oscar player. I think Belfast is a better movie, but this may be a little more on the entertaining side compared to Belfast. And he brings over some of the elements that worked really, really well in Belfast. And I look at the shots, the camera angles, the atmosphere, the vibe, the color correction. It felt like Branagh really wanted to make a horror film, but he really wanted to bring Poirot back in and say, yeah, I want him, but I want this. What do I do? Well, let's combine both of these ideas and let's bring in something fresh. Brilliant! And when it comes to horror movies that I've seen in 2023, it feels really fresh, and that's cool. So is it Branagh's best movie beyond Belfast? Well, I can't say it's his best movie beyond Belfast, but I can say recently, compared to the rest of this trilogy, Artemis Fowl, we don't like to talk about that. And even Thor, man. Thor, it was really heavy with the Dutch angles. You get some Dutch angles in Haunting in Venice, but I think of some of these shots in this movie, whether it be small boat traveling the waters of Venice, arriving at the house for the very first time, the way that we're looking upon our characters, looking down at our characters, the way these seance scenes are composed, man. A lot of attention to detail here. Way more attention to detail than you see with other, I guess, bigger budgeted blockbusters, other, I'd say studio films recently. And I was actually okay with a lot of the blockbusters we got this year, but I haven't really had one that has just completely surpassed my expectations. And while I don't think this film is great, I do think it's really good. And that's so unexpected compared to the rest of this trilogy that I just thought was okay, and I thought this was going to cap off the most okay trilogy of all time. But it is Branagh's best. It's Branagh's best in the trilogy, and it's one of his best more recent films. And his performance, this may be the best we have seen from him as this character. There's a lot he's having to deal with, whether it be what he believes, how he feels he can solve this mystery, because he's retired. He's away from the game at this point. And of course, he's brought back in, he's sucked back in to do something very small. But then in the midst of this seance, in the midst of what everyone's trying to get him to believe is something beyond these worldly events, he realizes that it's time to solve another mystery. And that's cool, right? It's almost a reflection of sorts. And yeah, I think of films like Logan. I think of movies where, you know, these older people that are now out of the game have to come back in the game and do something that makes them feel alive, makes them feel real again. It's a character study. And it was really cool to see him just completely embrace that. And even though he may not be as exaggerated and even funny, it's the best we've seen him as the character. Absolutely. And it really helps when you have this cast. Michelle Yeoh is as awesome as I expected her to be. Bringing Jamie Dornan in was a great decision, a great move. He has some really standout, extremely emotional sequences with Kyle Allen, who is also giving a more compelling performance than I've seen from him in quite a bit. The only character that I didn't fully love and embrace was Tina Fey's character. I do think she was overdoing it at times and over-delivering on some lines that I felt needed to be just a bit more subtle, but it's not a performance that takes away from everybody together. I think the best part of this film, beyond the cast and beyond, obviously, the way this movie looks, the cinematography, it's a standout. It's great. One of the best-looking blockbusters of the year. But it's the shift in genre, right? You have a mystery. We've seen countless mysteries like this before. I think that's the big issue with the movie, is the story is just a little more predictable than I wanted it to be. Some twists in there that got me. And then the biggest detriment I would give it is the pacing, because that second act, it just moves so slow and it feels like not a lot happens. So there were points where I was checking my watch, the second act, I'm like, oh no, this is going to go downhill, just like the other two movies, but it never fully does. And then the third act just brings it right back up and I'm like, okay. But it's the horror elements, it's the spooky elements that come to life via atmosphere, that come to life via great shot selection, and that worked so well, and taking this genre in that direction was a bold decision, but it was the right decision, and it helped this film end up being good. A lot better than the first two. Before I give you my score, what'd you think about A Haunting in Venice? What is your favorite movie in the trilogy? And again, let me know, do you like the graphics? Is it too much? And I'm surprised with how Haunting in Venice caps off this trilogy with easily the most interesting entry. Beyond Belfast, this is Branagh's best work in years. The camera work rocks, and it adds so much to this atmospheric mystery. But Detective Poirot is fantastic. It's a tad bit slow, but well executed. I want to know what you think about this movie down below, and stay tuned. Now that I'm feeling better, we're going to have some reviews on this channel. Hopefully this next week is going to be jam-packed. Thanks for giving me some time. I'm hoping to feel a lot better. My daughter was sick too. That took a lot of my time, but she's feeling better. I'm feeling a little bit better, but I'm here, and that's all that matters. Thanks for watching. See you soon.